Thanks for tuning in to Crazy Mango Stories. Give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for more betrayal stories. Elena Martinez adjusted the strap of her camera bag as she stood before the wrought iron gates of the Blackwood estate. The towering, ivy-covered mansion seemed to leer at her, its grandeur tempered by a sense of unease that prickled at the back of her neck. She clutched the embossed invitation in her hand, the elegant scrawl inviting her to an exclusive dinner with Victor Blackwood, a name whispered with reverence in art circles. Victor Blackwood wasn't just a collector, he was a kingmaker. His patronage could launch careers, and his influence opened doors others could only dream of. When Elena received his unexpected call, praising her work as a freelance photographer, she had been stunned. "Your eye for detail is exceptional," he had said, his smooth baritone resonating through the phone. "I'd like to discuss an opportunity with you personally." It had been Mia who'd tried to dissuade her. "Elena, you barely know this guy," she'd argued over coffee. "Powerful men like that, they don't invite you over for casual chats. It's dangerous." "I can handle myself," Elena had replied with a mix of confidence and defiance. Her career needed a breakthrough, and this dinner could be it. The thought of capturing Victor's private art collection, maybe even collaborating with him, was too tempting to ignore. Still, as she rang the gilded doorbell and heard its hollow chime echo through the mansion, Mia's words lingered in her mind. The heavy door swung open, revealing Victor himself. He was taller than she'd imagined, with an impeccable suit that accentuated his sharp features and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Elena," he said warmly, stepping aside to let her in. "Welcome. I've been looking forward to this." Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of opulence. Polished marble floors gleamed under ornate chandeliers, and walls adorned with rare artwork seemed to absorb the dim lighting, giving the space a hushed, almost reverent atmosphere. Victor guided her through the grand foyer into a dining room set for two. The table, a sprawling mahogany piece, was adorned with candles and silverware that looked like it belonged in a museum. As they sat, Victor poured wine into delicate crystal glasses. "I hope you don't mind the intimacy of this arrangement," he said, his tone conversational. "I find smaller gatherings more conducive to meaningful discussions." Elena forced a smile, trying to ignore the subtle edge in his voice. "I appreciate the invitation. Your collection must be incredible." Victor's eyes glinted. "It is. But I'm more interested in your perspective. A fresh lens, as it were." Their conversation meandered through art, philosophy, and ambition. Victor was charming, too charming. His compliments felt rehearsed, his interest calculated. When she glanced around, her eyes caught a faint shimmer in the corner of the room. She squinted, and her stomach tightened. A camera lens? No, it couldn't be. "Is something wrong?" Victor's voice broke her concentration, pulling her back to the moment. His smile widened as he leaned closer. "You seem distracted." Elena shifted in her seat, her pulse quickening. "No, just admiring the room." "Good," he said, raising his glass. "To collaboration." She clinked glasses with him, the crystalline sound echoing ominously. But as she sipped, the hairs on her arms stood on end. Something wasn't right, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could pretend otherwise. Elena's fingers grazed the delicate stem of her wineglass as she fought to suppress her growing unease. The flickering candlelight painted shadows on Victor's face, accentuating the sharp angles of his features. He spoke animatedly about his philosophy on art, how it wasn't just about beauty, but about power, control, and truth. Though his words were captivating, they carried a weight that unsettled her. It was as though every sentence was laden with hidden meaning, every glance a test. "I'm glad you accepted my invitation," Victor said, swirling the wine in his glass. "You're different, Elena. Your work shows it. You don't just see the world, you dissect it." "That's rare." Elena tried to smile, but her instinct screamed at her to leave. She glanced toward the entrance to the dining room, noting the heavy wooden doors slightly ajar. Beyond them, the faint ticking of a grandfather clock filled the silence whenever Victor paused. It felt like the house itself was watching her. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice steady but clipped. "I've always believed that the details matter. They tell the story most people overlook." Victor leaned back in his chair, his lips curving into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Exactly, and it's those details that make people like us dangerous." The word hung in the air, chilling her. Before she could respond, he stood abruptly and gestured toward an adjacent hallway. "Come. I want to show you something special." Elena hesitated, her pulse quickening. She glanced at her phone on the table, noting the time. "Actually, Victor interrupted, his tone firm but polite. "Trust me, you'll find it worth your while." With no graceful way to decline, Elena rose and followed him. The hallway stretched into darkness, the only illumination coming from dim sconces that lined the walls. The air grew cooler as they walked, and the faint scent of aged wood and something metallic filled her nostrils. Victor led her to a door at the end of the corridor, unlocking it with a heavy brass key. "I call this my sanctuary," he said, pushing the door open. The room was nothing like she'd expected. Instead of a traditional gallery, it was a cavernous space filled with towering shelves of books, artifacts encased in glass, and sculptures that seemed almost alive under the faint amber glow of recessed lighting. Cameras were mounted unobtrusively in the corners, their red indicator lights barely visible but unmistakable. Elena's stomach churned. The cameras weren't for security, they were aimed inward, focused on the room itself. "What is this place?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. Victor closed the door behind them, the metallic click of the lock sending a shiver down her spine. "This is where I capture truth," he said, gesturing grandly to the room. "Every piece here has a story, a moment frozen in time, much like what you do with your camera." Her eyes darted to the artifacts. They were exquisite, but something about their arrangement felt off, as though they were trophies rather than art. She caught sight of a small desk near the corner. A leather-bound book sat open, its pages filled with scrawled notes and what appeared to be photographs. Curiosity outweighed her fear, and she stepped closer to the desk. Victor didn't stop her, watching with a smile that was equal parts indulgent and predatory. The photographs weren't landscapes or still lifes. They were people, women to be exact. Some appeared candid, others staged, but all of them shared the same haunted expression. "Elena," Victor said softly, stepping behind her. "Do you see the beauty in their vulnerability?" She froze, her mind racing. These women, did they know you were photographing them? His silence was answer enough. Elena's hand brushed against her camera bag. The weight of it grounded her, reminding her she wasn't powerless. "I think I've seen enough for one night," she said, turning to face him. Victor's smile faltered. "You disappoint me, Elena. I thought you, of all people, would understand." "Understand what?" she snapped, stepping back toward the door. "That the world is a stage and we're all performers. Some of us just know how to play the audience better than others." Her fingers found the doorknob, but it didn't budge. "Unlock this." Victor took a step closer, his calm demeanor replaced by something darker. "Not yet. We're not finished." Elena's breath quickened as she scanned the room for another exit. The cameras, the locked door, Victor's predatory gaze. It all clicked into place. She had walked into a trap. But if Victor underestimated her, he would regret it. Elena's heart thundered as she gripped the cold brass doorknob, twisting it again. In vain. Victor stood a few steps away, his expression calm yet unreadable, a predator savoring the moment before the kill. "Don't make this difficult," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "I'm giving you an opportunity to be part of something extraordinary." Why waste it? Elena forced herself to appear composed, though every instinct screamed at her to fight or flee. "Extraordinary? You mean luring people here under false pretenses and turning them into your projects?" She gestured toward the room, where the haunting photographs and omnipresent cameras confirmed her worst fears. Victor chuckled softly, as though her accusation was a compliment. "You misunderstand. I don't force anyone to do anything. They reveal their truths willingly. That's the brilliance of it. The camera doesn't lie. It captures what people try so hard to hide." Elena's eyes darted to the cameras mounted in the room. Were they recording her now? How much had they already captured? She resisted the urge to look directly into one, not wanting to give him the satisfaction. Instead, she moved carefully toward the desk where the leather-bound journal lay open. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Victor tilted his head, studying her as though she were an intriguing puzzle. "Your perspective, your talent. You see the world differently, Elena, and I want to see it through your eyes. Imagine what we could create together. Raw, unfiltered truth." She knew better than to let him dictate the conversation. "And the women in those photographs?" she countered, gesturing toward the journal. "Did they see the truth too? Or did you manipulate them into becoming your little experiments?" Victor's gaze darkened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something behind his calm facade. Annoyance, perhaps even anger. Manipulate? No, Elena. I liberated them. They were confined by their own masks, and I gave them freedom. Some appreciated it, others. He shrugged. Let's just say not everyone is ready to confront who they truly are. Elena's fingers brushed against her camera bag, its familiar weight grounding her in the surreal situation. If she could distract him long enough, she might be able to use the flash to blind him temporarily, or snap a photo that could serve as evidence. But first, she needed more information. And time. You think you're some kind of savior, she said, her tone sharp. But all I see is a man hiding behind his money and power to exploit others. That's not liberation, it's control. Victor took a slow step toward her, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Control is necessary to create something meaningful. Chaos produces nothing but mediocrity. He gestured to the room around them. This is art. This is order. Alina's mind raced, searching for a way to turn his arrogance against him. Art is about connection, she said carefully, inching toward the desk. It's about sharing perspectives, not imposing them. You've twisted it into something ugly. Victor stopped, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she wondered if she'd struck a nerve. That's where you're wrong, he said finally, his voice quieter but no less intense. Art is about revealing the beauty in darkness. And darkness, Elena, is where people's true selves reside. Her fingers grazed the edge of the journal. It was filled with notes in Victor's meticulous handwriting, dates, names, and phrases that hinted at his obsession with control and domination. Her eyes landed on a name she recognized. A fellow photographer who had disappeared from the scene months ago, her work suddenly vanishing without explanation. What happened to her? Elha asked, pointing to the entry. The truth, Victor. His smile returned, thin and calculating. She wasn't ready to embrace her potential. She chose to walk away. A shame, really. Alina didn't believe him for a second. Whatever had happened to that woman, she doubted it was voluntary. Oh, the realization sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through her veins. If she didn't escape, would her name end up in this book too? Another project Victor claimed to liberate? She needed to act. Elena? Victor said, taking another step closer. Stop fighting this. You're not like the others. You understand the value of truth, of exposure. That's why I chose you. I don't think you chose me, she said sharply, gripping the journal and pulling it close. I think you preyed on me. Victor's eyes flickered to the journal in her hands. For the first time, his calm exterior cracked, and a flash of irritation crossed his face. Put that down. Instead, Alina opened the journal and ripped out the page with the familiar name, shoving it into her bag. Why? Afraid I'll expose your little operation? Or maybe you just can't handle losing control. Victor lunged toward her, his composure evaporating. Alina reacted instinctively, yanking her camera from her bag and firing the flash directly into his eyes. He stumbled back, cursing as he shielded his face. Seizing the moment, she darted for the door. The lock was sturdy, but she'd spotted a key hanging on a nearby hook earlier. Grabbing it, she fumbled to fit it into the lock as Victor recovered, his steps heavy and deliberate behind her. Elena, he barked, his voice thunderous. Don't you dare! The lock clicked, and the door swung open. She bolted down the hallway, her pulse pounding as she raced toward the main entrance. Freedom was in sight, but Victor wasn't far behind, and she wasn't leaving without ensuring the evidence she carried would take him down for good. Elena sprinted down the dimly lit hallway, the sound of her hurried footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Behind her, Victor's angry shouts grew louder, each syllable dripping with menace. The journal page stuffed in her bag felt like a lifeline, but her heart pounded as she realized how far she still was from safety. The grandeur of the mansion, which had initially felt intoxicating, now seemed like a labyrinth designed to trap her. Ornate mirrors reflected her panicked expression as she navigated the endless corridors, each turn feeling more disorienting than the last. "Elena," Victor's voice bellowed from somewhere close. "You can't outrun me. Stop before you make this worse for yourself." His words sent chills down her spine, but she didn't stop. She didn't dare. Her hands gripped the strap of her camera bag tightly, her knuckles white. The weight of the journal page in her camera wasn't just physical. It was a reminder of everything at stake. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts as she pushed through a heavy door that led into another part of the estate. This room was even darker, lit only by the faint moonlight streaming through high, arched windows. It seemed to be an old library, with rows of towering bookshelves, creating narrow aisles. She darted into one of them, pressing her back against the wood as she tried to calm her racing heart. The sound of Victor's measured footsteps entered the room, his pace slow and deliberate now. He wasn't rushing anymore. He didn't need to. "Elena!" he called again, his tone softer this time, but no less threatening. "You're only making things harder for yourself. This isn't a game. Come out and we can talk about this like adults." Elena bit her lip, trying to steady her breathing. The shelves around her were lined with old, leather-bound books that smelled faintly of dust and decay. Her eyes scanned the space for an exit, but the only way out seemed to be the way she'd come. She shifted her weight carefully, trying not to disturb the fragile silence. Victor's footsteps stopped. "I know you're here," he said, his voice carrying a chilling certainty. "I can hear you." Elena froze, her pulse pounding in her ears. She glanced toward the end of the aisle and saw his shadow stretch across the floor, the flickering light from a nearby wall sconce casting it into sharp relief. She reached into her camera bag, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of her lens. An idea sparked. Risky, but it might buy her some time. Carefully, she adjusted the settings on her camera, cranking up the ISO and preparing the flash. Victor's shadow grew larger as he rounded the corner. Elena waited, her heart in her throat. The moment his figure appeared in the narrow aisle, she stepped forward and fired the flash directly into his eyes. A bright burst of light illuminated the library, and Victor stumbled back with a cry of pain, his hands flying to his face. "Damn it," he growled, momentarily blinded. Elena didn't waste a second. She bolted down the aisle, weaving between the shelves and heading for the door. Her mind raced as she tried to recall the layout of the mansion. If she could find the main foyer, she'd be closer to the front entrance. And freedom. As she burst through the library door, she found herself in yet another unfamiliar hallway. This one was lined with more of Victor's prized art collection, paintings and sculptures that seemed to leer at her as she passed. The eerie silence of the space was broken only by the distant sound of Victor recovering from her flash attack. "Elena!" he shouted, his voice filled with rage. "You can't get away from me. Do you think anyone will believe you? Do you think you're safe out there without me?" She ignored his threats and focused on finding her way out. Up ahead, she spotted a staircase spiraling downward. It wasn't the direction she wanted, but staying still wasn't an option. She took the steps two at a time, gripping the ornate railing for balance. The stairs led her into the mansion's basement, a stark contrast to the opulence of the upper floors. The space was cold and industrial, with concrete walls and a faint hum of machinery. The faint glow of emergency lighting illuminated a steel door at the far end of the room, its red exit sign promising escape. Relief surged through her, but it was short-lived. Behind her, she heard Victor descending the stairs, his steps echoing ominously. "You won't make it," he taunted, his voice dripping with menace. "You'll run. But the world is my stage, Elena. Wherever you go, I'll find you." Pushing through the fear, she sprinted toward the steel door, her shoes skidding slightly on the slick floor. She reached it just as Victor's footsteps grew dangerously close. Her fingers found the latch, and with a desperate shove, she pushed it open. Cold night air hit her face as she stumbled outside. She was in the estate's sprawling backyard, the towering mansion behind her, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. The gardens stretched out before her, a maze of hedges and statues. Elena didn't stop. She tore through the manicured paths, her lungs burning with the effort. Somewhere behind her, Victor's voice roared in frustration, but she didn't look back. Ahead, she spotted the wrought iron gates she'd entered through hours earlier. This time, they represented salvation. She dug deep, sprinting toward them with everything she had. As she reached the gates, she fumbled for the latch and shoved them open. The quiet hum of a car engine in the distance told her she was finally free from the estate. But Victor's threats echoed in her mind. He wouldn't give up so easily. And now, it wasn't just about her survival. It was about making sure he never did this to anyone else again. The icy wind bit at Elena's cheeks as she hurried down the darkened road, her breaths clouding the cold night air. Her legs ached, her adrenaline waning now that she had escaped Victor's sprawling estate. But relief was fleeting. She knew her ordeal wasn't over. She clutched her camera bag like a lifeline, the weight of the journal page and photos inside, a stark reminder of the danger Victor Blackwood posed, not just to her, but to anyone he lured into his web. Elena's immediate goal was clear. She needed to get somewhere safe and expose Victor's predatory behavior before he could strike again. As she walked, headlights appeared in the distance. She waved frantically, stepping into the road. The car slowed, a cautious figure behind the wheel, peering out at her. "Are you okay?" the driver, a middle-aged woman, asked as she rolled down the window slightly. "Please, I need help," Elena said, her voice shaky but resolute. "I just escaped from someone dangerous. Can you take me to the police?" The woman hesitated, her eyes scanning Elena's disheveled appearance, but nodded. "Get in." The warmth of the car was a stark contrast to the chill outside, but Elena couldn't relax. Her mind raced, replaying every detail of the night. She needed to be precise when she reported what had happened. Her evidence, the page from Victor's journal, the photos on her camera, would be critical in taking him down. "Thank you," she said, as the car sped toward the nearest town. "You don't know how much this means." The woman glanced at her, concern etched into her features. "You're safe now. Whatever happened, the police will handle it." But Elena wasn't entirely sure. Victor was powerful, connected, and manipulative. She couldn't rely solely on the authorities. This wasn't just about justice. It was about ensuring Victor couldn't twist the narrative. At the police station, the fluorescent lights were harsh, making her exhaustion more apparent. An officer with a notepad sat across from her in the small interview room. "Start from the beginning," he said, his tone professional but skeptical. "You're saying Victor Blackwood trapped you in his house?" Elena nodded, gripping her bag tightly. "Yes, and I have proof. He's been recording people, manipulating them, exploiting them. Look." She pulled out the torn journal page and her camera. The officer examined the evidence, his brow furrowing. "We've heard rumors about Blackwood," he admitted, "but nothing concrete enough to act on." "This is concrete," Elena pressed, her voice gaining strength. "Look at his journal. He keeps records of the people he's targeted. Check the names. Some of them have disappeared." The officer exchanged a glance with a colleague standing nearby. "We'll look into it," he said, though his tone suggested it wouldn't be quick or easy. Elena's frustration flared. "You don't understand. He's not going to stop. If you wait, he'll destroy evidence, or worse, hurt someone else." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "We'll contact a detective. In the meantime, you should stay somewhere safe." The next morning, Elena sat in a small hotel room, the events of the previous night replaying in her mind. She'd uploaded all her photos and video files to a secure cloud drive, along with a written account of everything that had happened. But waiting for the police to act felt agonizingly slow. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mia. "Mia, where are you? Are you okay? I'm worried." Elena quickly typed a response. "Elena, I'm safe. I need your help. Can you meet me?" At a cafe on the edge of town, Elena filled Mia in on everything. Her best friend's face turned pale as she listened. "I told you he sounded sketchy," Mia said, her voice trembling. "But this, Elena, this is worse than I imagined." "I can't let him get away with it," Elena said firmly. "He's going to keep preying on people unless we stop him. I've already gone to the police, but we need to do more." "What do you have in mind?" "Public exposure," Elena said, pulling out her laptop. "I have the evidence. If the police drag their feet, we'll take this story to the press. People need to know who he really is." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. With Mia's help, Elena drafted a detailed report, attaching the photos, videos, and the journal page as supporting evidence. She sent it to several major news outlets, along with a message warning them about the sensitive nature of the material. By evening, her phone was buzzing non-stop. A prominent investigative journalist had responded, expressing interest in her story. 2 days later, the headlines broke. Victor Blackwood's dark secrets, exploitation and deception behind the art world's golden boy. The story spread like wildfire, bolstered by Elena's evidence and corroboration from others who came forward after seeing her report. Victor's carefully crafted reputation began to crumble. Elena watched the news unfold from the safety of her hotel room, a mixture of relief and lingering fear coursing through her. She wasn't naive. She knew Victor might retaliate. But for now, the world knew the truth, and she vowed to use her platform to ensure no one else would fall victim to someone like him again.